Today I'm going to talk to you about the Ronnie Rig, and not just because we're going to be coming into the spring and it is probably one of the most effective rigs you can use for casting bright pop-ups about the lake in the spring, which is an absolutely killer method. But there's a few different aspects to the Ronnie Rig and we're going to run through it now. So the Ronnie Rig, why is it so effective? Well, a bit like its older brother, the 360 rig, it's got a really good 360 motion, and that means whatever direction the carp approaches the bait from, as it sucks in, the hook automatically turns round and presents itself to the fish's mouth, which is a real plus when it comes to fishing a rig. Boom sections. When you see Ronnie rigs, 99.9% of the time they're going to be fished on a stiff boom, so as the lead hits the bottom, the pop-up pushes away and it leaves it presented. In the last few years I've done really well on supple boom sections for the Ronnie Rig, and I do use both, and there's a reason why I use both of these. So if you're casting at showing fish and you want the rig to present 100% every time, I'll use a stiff boom, because it's going to sit away from the lead setup and kick away as it hits the bottom. But if I'm dropping Ronnie rigs from a boat or close in, I tend to use something like the 25-pound Camo X. It's a soft coated material and it gives me a little bit more suppleness in the rig. So if you're on a soft bottom and you're fishing a boom, you can end up like this, with it sitting up off the bottom. But if you've got a nice supple hook link, it will just ride the silt. So sometimes I will use a supple hook link. I'm going to go through how I tie my boom and how I set my Ronnie Rig up now. So I start off with a Spectre in 20-pound. I always pull off a bit more than I need, probably 15 inches there, to tie up a 7-inch rig. Snip that off, give it a nice pull and it will straighten out. It's quite a stiff material. Then I'm going to use a rotator swivel or a Ronnie swivel. I'm going to put that on, and I don't like to have the ring on my swivel because the loop of the figure of 8 knot acts as the ring. So I just pull that over, figure of 8 knot there. Try and keep that loop as small as you can, a little bit of spit on it, and use your pulling tool, something nice and rounded that isn't going to mark the fluorocarbon. So when you pull it tight, you're not going to like indent the fluorocarbon, you're going to keep it nice and rounded. So I'll give that a nice pull, snip the tail off on the figure of 8, and obviously on the pulling tool you can really round off that knot so you've got a lovely loop. And then what I'm going to do is add a little bit of putty over that knot, and because you're putting putty over a knot, it's a really good grip point for the putty, so it's not going to slide when you're casting. So once the figure of 8 knot is tied, my next thing is to add a sinker. I'm using a large sinker here, just squeezing it over. And what I like to do with them, I have them about 3/4 of the way down, and that just holds that fluorocarbon to the bottom nice and tight. Next thing is an anti-tangle sleeve. I'm using the short ones here. Get a nice cut on that. And again, once you've got that through, I'm going to tie another figure of 8 knot. Now lengthwise, I vary between 9 and 7 inches. So this one I'm going to tie up at 7 inches, and that's sort of my favourite length for casting around. It's my go-to sort of length. But if I'm fishing helicopter rigs and there's a bit of silt about, I might go to 9 inches. So again, keeping that figure of 8 knot as small as possible, little bit of spit on it, get it on the pulling tool, pull it nice and tight, and then snip it off as short as you can. So I'm going to add my putty to the knot, and that is the boom section complete. So there you have your boom section complete, 7 inches, the sinker slightly forward. I've noticed they work even better if you go slightly forward towards the hook. When you're casting out, more of the weight goes forward, so as it hits the bottom, it literally comes down and lays it out straight away. It really does help with the anti-tangle properties of this rig. Well, my favourite type of hook for the Ronnie Rig is a medium curve, and there's a reason for that. The medium curves have a slight kick in the eye, and when I was just using the curved shaped hook, which most people will use on a Ronnie or a spinner rig, I was suffering some hook pulls. So I changed over to the medium curve, and just that little kick in the eye completely eliminated my hook pulls. So that is my go-to hook now when I'm using the Ronnie Rig. First thing you do when it comes to your hook is you slide on your kicker. You can use shrink tube. I prefer to use a kicker because if you have a fish and you want to replace your hook, you simply pull the kicker up and stick another hook on, which you've probably already got prepared if you're clever. So after that, it's the mini ring swivel that goes onto the hook, then the fiddly bit, the hook bead, and that goes on. Pull it round. I like my hook bead quite near the top of the hook, probably 3/4 of the way up it. So that's your hook set up. Then when you hook on your Ronnie swivel, I like to go so it's coming out the back of the eye like a knot. I just think it's a little bit safer. Slide down your kicker and you can put a nice angle on it. That's the Ronnie Rig, an absolutely brilliant rig that will turn the hook round no matter what direction the carp approaches it from. The only limitations of this rig is the height of the pop-up. You're limited by the size of your hook to how far off the bottom you are. To fish hook baits 2 to 3 inches off the bottom, you're going to need a different rig, something like the hinge stiff, and we're going to cover that in a different video. So my favourite colour in the spring is probably a bright yellow or a faded pink, seem to work really well, but today I'm going to go with the bright yellow. A little bit of floss through the back of the mini ring swivel, pull it through and sink that mini ring swivel into the bait. Then trim that off nice and short, then blob it off with a lighter. There you have it. And it's ready to go. Let's get that out in the lake, see if we can't catch a fish.